Whatever your political alignment, it cannot be denied that there has been a massive influx in the extreme right wing in the United States, especially leading up to and since the election of Donald Trump. Where Europe sees racist right-wing militant organizations as a daily fact of life, the U.S. conception of such radicals has been at best regarded as a joke. Google Bill Riccio for a look at the man who is arguably the poster child for the U.S. pop culture's conception of racial extremism, poor, ill-mannered white trash that cruises shopping malls looking for impressionable kids to recruit to his cause. In other words, a pathetic joke of a man and a relic of a bygone era. As much as we would like to pretend that right-wing racism is a thing of the past in this country and that we can easily shrug it off in favor of bashing the bowel-clenching irritants on the left, we cannot ignore this new threat to the progress made over decades. Yes, much of that progress has at times felt like 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, but it is progress nonetheless. By now, the mainstream is generally aware of the so-called alternative right or alt-right, but a public understanding of what that means is severely lacking. This is, unfortunately, owing in part to the publicity given to the movement by Breitbart journalist Milo Yiannopoulos, whose sympathetic coverage of the alt-right led him to be maligned as a white supremacist by his opponents. Having met and interacted with Milo directly, I can say from personal experience that he is most certainly not a white supremacist. He is, if anything, a Milo supremacist. That said, he has made a costly error in trying to flex the definition of the alt-right to encompass all groups who oppose the current trend of social justice-minded left-wingers. Previously, he had been referring to such burgeoning opposition as the advent of a new cultural libertarianism, meaning people who are socially tolerant of ideas all across the spectrum and reject political correctness outright. That's a great stance to take, and one of which I would consider myself a proponent. If he had stayed with this, Milo would have likely been in a better standing with his current platform. Despite his claims, the alt-right is not a hip new amalgamation of libertarians, classical liberals, conservatives, and, maybe a few racial radicals. The alt-right is, unilaterally and without exception, about one thing and one thing only: white nationalism, period, full stop. The origin of the expression alt-right goes back to a webzine titled Alternative Right that was conceived and created by one Richard Spencer for the purpose of propagating a movement towards European ethno-nationalism, and within that, a rejection of modernity and embrace of hardline traditionalism. The website Alternative Right has in recent years been renamed Radix Journal and given a slick makeover, but the concepts and content remain the same. While previously a background player, Radix founder Richard Spencer has enjoyed a new prominence thanks to media inquiries into just what the hell the alt-right actually is. It's understandable that compared to the white knights of yesteryear, see what I did there, Richard Spencer is infinitely more palatable. He's generally polite, erudite, and ready to defend his ideas on an intellectual level, albeit one with a very low ceiling. That said, his attempts at rebranding the pro-white agenda of the past amounts to little more than putting lipstick on a pig. He balks at the notion of being a white supremacist per se, preferring to claim that he simply sees race as the inescapable basis for identity, but when he makes statements like those in his infamous Hail Trump speech where he says that white people don't need other races but other races need white people, he inadvertently shows his cards. When you're saying your race is on top of the heap and should be recognized as such, you are a racial supremacist, whether you like to admit it or not. It is crucial that people like Richard Spencer be stopped intellectually, but his leading opposition, the cultural left, is presently bereft of the tools necessary to do so. It is for this reason that I want to outline exactly what must be done to shut down someone like Richard Spencer intellectually and culturally. First and foremost, don't engage with him directly. This is something that people who attend his lectures to protest him fail to grasp. Look at the expression on Richard Spencer's face when people become angry with him.
And that is how we got that greatness. And so you're saying we revert back to those ways in which we achieve this greatness by infringing upon the rights of the minorities and the ethnic groups within our country.
No, it's not good to be a minority. I totally agree with you. That's why I don't want my children to be minorities. You enjoy being a minority.
He glows. He is a psychic vampire, and he is feeding off the mental energy of the people that he gets riled up. On the other hand, look at the aforementioned Milo Yiannopoulos, who, despite being quick with a comeback and willing to engage with his detractors, does show characteristics of being drained and aggravated by them in general.
Of them believe in inequality between the sexes. Why? Because they know that feminism has become something different now. They know that the feminism you're talking about, it's very convenient, isn't it, to sort of treat men like shit, and then when people say, I'm not a feminist, say, oh, but feminism's out of quality. That's not what feminism has become. It's not what feminism is anymore. Feminism is a mean, vindictive, spiteful, nasty, man-hating philosophy that has very little... Well, let me finish, because I let you finish, okay?
Not so with Spencer. He beams with joy when people are infuriated and hostile. As a psychic vampire who feeds on mental energy, he is internally a bottomless pit into which the good intentions of the world are poured, never to be satiated. There is no point in going to Spencer's public appearances and attempting to argue him down. Look at these examples if you disagree.
You are right in stating that Texas A&M is one of the most conservative universities in this nation. And for that reason, we will not stand by your rhetoric. I was highly disappointed in what I heard. And thirdly, you talk about...
The left agrees with you. Does that tell you something about conservatism, perhaps?
Well, honestly, I'm not too worried about political leanings
useless
right now. I'm glad with anybody who stands against this rhetoric. But anyway, on to my...
So I'm going to just try to speak to you in plain language.
Okay.
Right. So I just want to thank everyone that was able to sit through this. And so on behalf of us, I just want to let you know, I had to hear what you had to say. So you are an asshole. Fuck everyone that agrees with you, that stand for what you say. Like, and that's just in plain, uneducated language. Like, but no. So now my actual question after I've said my fuck yous on behalf of everyone. Thank you.
Fuck you too.
Right. My question is, I spoke to this gentleman here, and he...
BTHOH, hate, what does that mean?
That stands for beat the hell out of hate.
Oh, that's very nice. I don't care what... So boring and bourgeois, yet you're going to beat the hell out of me? Really?
No,
What are you waiting for?
That's...
You're wearing this T-shirt, sir. Well, I'm right here. Why don't you come beat me up?
I was intending to ask a civil question, sir.
Why are you wearing a violent T-shirt that says you're going to beat
Go to
the
A&M.
hell out of...
Spend a little time at A&M and you'll figure out what this means.
Oh, effectively it means nothing. Because you, I knew you when I saw you first coming in. I've seen millions of people like you. You are a white coward. You wear some little T-shirt, beat the hell out of hate. Yeah, you're not even willing to do that. That T-shirt is total bullshit. You're not even willing to go to the gym. Look how fat you are. You can't beat the hell out of anything, sir. Seriously. I have to say, people say I am based on hate.
I hope this is getting on tape.
I have utter
This
contempt.
is free speech, everybody.
I have utter contempt for losers like you, sir. You wear a violent T-shirt. You're not even willing to actually do anything. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?
May I ask my question, please?
Now, look at the way he told that man off. Most people are loath to point out such extreme negative examples in another person. Empathy prevents us from tearing someone down completely, and on the rare occasion that it's necessary, we feel pained and remorseful even when it's completely accurate. Not Spencer. He's positively elated. So no, don't engage with Spencer directly. I will repeat that he is a psychic vampire, and I do not make that charge lightly. The more effective use of your time is in engaging with people who are on the fence. Stop him from gaining new recruits and he will fade into the woodwork. Just as Bill Riccio is still, to this day, cruising shopping malls looking for kids to indoctrinate, so Richard Spencer will always be with us. He will never admit fault in his ideas, and he will always have a small cadre of loyalists that will help him pay his bills, but he will be neutralized from having any larger cultural impact. The fence sitters are crucial. I can remember being in high school in Oxford, Mississippi, when one of the kids put up his hand and said, "Why we gotta have a black people month, but there ain't no white people month?" The teacher gave him the most obvious PC response that every other month is White History Month by default. There is considerable truth to this notion. History books in the United States chart the westward push of European culture into the founding of the Americas and eventually the United States, and Africans don't enter that equation until the topic of slavery enters the discussion. As such, it's an important part of our going forward as a country to celebrate the great strides and achievements made by African Americans, and worthwhile to study the African cultures that preceded them. If you need an example of the impact of African culture, consider that gospel and blues music, foundational principles of the American popular song form, originated when African slaves began incorporating Christian musical and lyrical concepts into their indigenous group chants. And from that basis sprang rock and roll, jazz, R&B, and so much more. Getting back to the main point, I think that all white people, at least in the United States, probably have such a moment in their development. They realize that there is a fundamental hypocrisy in the fact that black identity is celebrated and fostered, but white identity is discouraged and condemned. I think most white people in general are willing, however, to go along with this. They look at the course of U.S. history and realize that a certain amount of racial unionizing was necessary for blacks to gain equal rights, and in many ways necessary to maintain it, and are willing to allow that fundamental disparity between the cultural relevance of black identity and white identity. This is a reasonable premise in and of itself. The problem is when it starts getting pushed into the realm of absurdity. Special interest groups mutate this black people can do X but not white people reasoning into a universal catch-all for all perceived hypocrisies to such a degree that virulent hate on the basis of race is somehow not racist if it is directed at white people. Well, okay, then we won't call it racist. It's just you being an asshole. So stop being an asshole. The sharp uptick of support for Richard Spencer and his kind comes from a climate of political correctness that has branded white identity as a default position of guilt, shame, and derision. That a white person at the moment of their birth must begin a lifelong penance that can never be paid off. That no matter how inclusive they are still racist and still bigoted and still hateful. No matter how loving they are to other races, they are still somehow filled with hate. That no matter how poor and downtrodden they might be, they're still somehow faring better than a black millionaire. You close every single door of compassion and rationality and demand that they be left shivering and cold in the rain-soaked back alley of your cold-hearted contempt and wonder why they scramble for the warmth and light of the doorway that Richard Spencer holds open for them. I am not suggesting that white people have not enslaved, tortured, and murdered other races in mass. They have. I am not suggesting that the United States was not built on the backs of slaves. It was. I am not suggesting that a disproportionate number of white people don't hold the reins of power and wealth in this country. They do. I am not suggesting that you who are racial minorities have not experienced your own individual instances of racism. I am certain that you have. I am talking about the energy that you project out into the world. Here is a truly radical notion. Here is a notion that will inflame and horrify you, but the truth is never something you want to hear. If you truly want to live in a post-racial society, and you truly want to shut down people like Richard Spencer, then you need to forgive white people. Remove the plank from your own eye before you attempt to remove the plank from your brother's eye. Go forward with love and compassion in your heart, and make sure that's genuine love and compassion, not just snobbery and sanctimony. Stop expecting white people to be ashamed of being white. A lack of shame is not the same thing as pride, and the fact that you see no neutral balance between pride and guilt speaks only to your unwillingness to empathize with your fellow humans. No, I'm not suggesting that this will answer all of society's ills or balance widespread inequality. But it will ensure that Richard Spencer and scumbags like him have nothing to cling to. It can only be the merciful appeal of group solidarity that gives him the spotlight. His arguments and justifications are wafer thin. Along with fellow race realist Jared Taylor, Spencer espouses a nationalistic worldview that proclaims that all human beings somehow function better when evenly divided into race-based nations. The notion that there has never been intramural strife among races is rendered absurd with even the most cursory glance at history. You can easily sweep the leg, but it will mean abandoning your own racial identity and becoming completely indifferent to people who wish to celebrate theirs. I know it sounds paradoxical, but the only way to neutralize a reactionary group is to give them nothing to react to. The only way to escape this bitter divide is to abandon all pretense of racial identity one way or the other and have the courage to stand as your own individual selves. I know that my saying that will incur the wrath of a legion of respondents who want to tell me that the only reason I'm able to conduct myself as an individualist with no adherence to racial identity is because I'm white. So to all who would suggest that, let me tell you another uncomfortable truth. The strongest chains are the ones you don't know you're wearing, and the person who taught you to tell me that is your actual master. They are the ones that have convinced you to give up, to let go, to accept that the odds are eternally stacked against you, so you might as well not even try. I realize that what I've said here may feel inflammatory, but I assure you that it isn't. In a sane world, it would be seen as some of the most reasonable, thoughtful, and compassionate advice imaginable. Sadly, the current world is the furthest thing from that, and it is still going off the rails on a crazy train. Kind regards, Jordan. If you enjoyed this commentary, please help me continue to bring you more content by making a donation to patreon.com/JordanOwen42. Your contribution will help me turn this channel into a hub of libertarian pop culture discussion and current events commentary. Thank you for listening, and as always, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.
Thank you very much. And I would encourage you to treat this presidency as an opportunity to take back some of the ground that was lost. And I don't necessarily mean fighting identity politics with identity politics, but rather reclaim for America some reason, some logic, some common sense. Demonstrate how insane and ludicrous this stuff is. Because, you know, the reality is, if you force everyone to play identity politics, if you insist on pitting whites against blacks, women against, men, straights against gays, the reality is you guys are going to win. And the left isn't going to like it very much. But there's a better way, Don't fight identity politics with identity politics. White pride, white nationalism, white supremacy isn't the way to go. The way to go is reminding them and yourselves that you should be aspiring to values and to ideas. You should be focusing on what unites people, not what drives them apart. And you shouldn't give a shit about skin color. You shouldn't give a shit about sexuality. You shouldn't give a shit about gender. And you should be deeply suspicious of the people who do. Thank you very much.